Well, the Apostle Paul gives some help to us. He gives a lot of help to us. I don't mean to imply it's barely enough. But Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, you're welcome to go there. You'll be familiar with it when you get there. But this text, the apostle says to parents, bring up a child, bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. So even the apostle Paul understands the duty of the training work. Bring them up in this way. Bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And it's very serious that you not miss the preposition here of the Lord. Because Paul in the book of Philippians, where he addresses those who are worldly minded, are you going to raise your children up in the admonition and the nurture of the world? The Apostle Paul says, oh heavens no, bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Now, do you have any idea that this is, are you beginning to understand this is going to have to be something that is more than just a Sunday morning occasion? Because you see, the Philistines have come along, if you will, and they have been filling up the wells with earth and garbage. The wells where God's people once went for refreshment and nourishment in the desert. The world has come along and have begun to fill them up. I should drop the declarer that they've come along. I think it's clear to say they have filled them up. It's not something that they're trying to do. From all observances of the culture that we now currently live in, the wells that our father Abraham dug have been filled with the garbage of the world. Parents, one of the best tools that are available for you for the helping and the training of your children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, training them up in the way that He should go, is you need to find yourself a gospel shovel. And you need to get blisters on your hands. And you must begin to re-dig the wells of Abraham. It is time for you as parents to pick up this task and this duty for the welfare and the benefit of your children. For the next generation to hear the news of the gospel is going to require a generation of parents today. They're going to feed their children on the wells of Abraham. Where are the parents with the blisters in their hands, with the shovels, digging the wells that the world has filled with its garbage? Where are you, parents? Are you here? Do you have a gospel shovel? Are you working in this labor? The parents, you must understand the need to reprove your children. Now, this is hard. This is done primarily biblically in two ways, in two sorts. There's a verbal reproving and there's a physical reproving. Now, this is dangerous for two reasons. One, our culture. Our culture is suggesting, and I probably shouldn't use the word suggesting any longer here. Our current culture is moved in such a direction that anything you do in this specific area of male and female of your children, that this is a fast-changing shift in our culture. And so it's dangerous because the culture doesn't agree with you any longer. The culture wants to say you have no right to give verbal instructions on how a man should live or how a woman should live or the difference between a boy and a girl. So we see that there is our culture makes this a risky work. It makes it a risky work as we begin to hear news of neighboring countries who pass laws that make what you do as a parent wanting to raise your children and train them in the admonition and in the nurture of the Lord, to make that way and that mean illegal. And thus the state to come, the danger lies here, the risk is available here that perhaps the state may think you're abusing your children because you're raising them in the ways of the Lord. That's a risky work. And it's even riskier that you've attached yourself to a church that espouses these things and encourages these things. And so it's risky. But notice there's nothing about riskiness in Proverbs 22, verse 6. It doesn't say, train up a child so long as it's convenient for you and so long as that child likes it. It's pretty risky. So not only is it risky because of our culture, but it's risky, secondly, because of our own sin nature. Every parent gets this. And those of you who are soon to be parents or will someday, by the grace of God, be a parent, if you do not understand your sin nature in the work of parenting, it is best for you to learn this quicker than later, as well as it is for you to train your children sooner than later. Your sin nature will drive you to behave improperly in the training work. It will drive you to be a verbal abuser, a shouter, and a yeller, and a screamer. It'll drive you to want to be physically abusive because the child doesn't get it and doesn't do it as quickly as you want them to. So you must understand your sin nature as you're in the work, as you're in the gospel work of raising your children. Understand the culture that we live in and understand your sin nature. Now from that, we do not let those are not excuses to not to go to the work. They are not excuses to go into the gospel field and to plow the gospel seed. Just know that there is that risk inherently engaged in the work. But know this, first of all, the training must be done. It just simply must be done. Years ago, conference speaker primarily to youth around the nation by the name of Dawson McAllister. I remember him saying very clearly to parents, his exhortation was to them that if you don't do this work, somebody else will. And I don't trust someone else, nor should you. If you do not do the work of training your children, trust me, somebody else will, and likely are training them. You have a God-ordained work. Now to the task and to the work. It must be done. Parents, you must determine that when you use a sharp correction for your children, it must be followed with sincerity and compassion. You don't just simply shout and demand something from a child. The child needs to understand why the activity was dangerous. Why was it a problem? And so that where there is verbal, and the verbal must be done, the correction, stop as the child is moving toward the street. Don't touch as they're about to touch a burning coal or an amber. The verbal must be there, but it must be coupled and it must be met with compassion. It must be met for that child to understand why it brought such a reaction upon you. And then there is the physical work that lays here. There's much debate in this. I understand it, and I try to stay fully abreast to the matters in the culture at large of the physical problems or the physical disciplining of our children. In other words, spanking of a child, the danger that lies there culturally. This is indeed a much debated matter. Let me be brief on it, but let me be clear. Let me be biblically clear. When physical correction is done properly, it is of greater benefit to the child to cry and to weep and to feel as though they've been offended by you than for them to think that that behavior that they've just done is appropriate and acceptable. They will overcome, and if you will, exercise the same compassion that you do as you're delivering verbal corrections to that you would do with physical correction. It will be a blessed blessing to the children. So there is a reproving work that has verbal and physical. Let me just briefly speak about the opposite of reproving your children. And that is what appears to be at every generation's great problem. Is there is an increasing pampering and an increasing doting of the children. Oh, I think there's a good time to pamper a child. I think there's a good time to dote on a child for good reasons. But if that is the normal action of the parent who thinks that this will be of benefit to the child, know this, that you are doing a grave danger to the child. If all you're doing is pampering and doting of the child, it makes way for rude, presumptuous, rebellious, careless, selfishness to take full root in the heart of your child. And remember, your duty as a parent, one of the greatest tools that you have is a gospel shovel. You don't want these things to take root in your children's lives. Again, if I go back to my garden and I just randomly scatter seed out there and say, good luck, I hope it comes up and I hope it works out, do you realize the weeds that are in that dirt will overcome every good thing that I plant in it if I do not give attention to uprooting the rooted problems? They will take the nourishment away from the good. They will drain it of its life. Rudeness will prevail. Presumptions will prevail. Rebellions will be the rule of the day. Carelessness of the child will rule. And selfishness will take full root. Now, those things are already present in your children. You know these things. Every child, as they begin to interact with the culture, with the surroundings of them, you begin to see these things are already present in them. And if you do not do a reproving work, those things will begin to choke the very life out of your children. Now again, I'm not denying the sovereign kindness of a holy God who can come along and snatch a child out of that kind of household and rescue him, put His gospel on him, put His righteousness in his life, and send him as a great messenger of the gospel to the ends of the earth. God can certainly do that. God has certainly done that. And perhaps even this room is filled with people of such backgrounds. So to the church body, there is a future reward that comes by the work of training up a child in the way that he should go. Remember, our work is to train him up in the way he should go, not in the way he wants to go. Train them up in the way that God would want them. Aim them at God and point them to God. And give them every reason to want to know the same God that you devote yourself to. Oh, that God would raise up among us big-souled believers, enlarged-hearted, longing with appetites for hunger, an appetite for righteousness and holiness of God. Oh, that they would find that from you as a parent, and oh, that they would find that from this, the church that they belong to. That they would find caring parents that love them and want them to walk in the ways of the Lord. And that they would find a church that would put the Word of God constantly in front of them for their benefit. They may not want it at the moment, but oh, that it would be for a future blessedness of God, for the advancement of the gospel into another generation. Because a hard laboring work has taken place in this generation by parents whose hands are blistered by digging out the wells of Abraham. Oh, dear church. Oh, dear parents. What a great work you have.